Hi everybody, my name is Mac Laskowski, and in this video we're going to take a look at an interesting way to do some masking inside of ON1, because there are so many ways to do masking on photos, but I think I've got a concept that will help you decide between whether or not it's really worth the work to do some serious masking or whether or not you can get away with a very quick technique that I'm going to demonstrate here. So let's go jump into edit. I'll reset this photo here. And a couple of things I would do just to move us along. For all of you techie people that are screaming at your computer, it looks tilted. I'll go in and level this just a little bit here. Just use my transform tool on the vertical surface and then just crop that in just a hair. All right, so now that we got that taken care of, so we're not looking sideways at the photo, I want to use my local adjustments to draw some light down this pathway, maybe even a little bit of light here. It just looks like there's an interesting play of light coming from the top down here on the wall and whatnot. And it'd be very tough for us to achieve any of this with all of our basically global settings. Even if we do shadows and everything, it's still very much a global setting. So I think overall, the exposure, the overall tone and color of the photo look fine. It's just, I want to direct your eye a little bit. So that's where I would go jump over to my local adjustment section. And I would use the brush for this and set this to paint in mode and keep a lower opacity, 50, 60%, and increase my exposure here. And then what I'm going to do is take a smaller brush and just paint down the paths that I want to move your eye along. All right, even a little bit over here I think looks cool. Right along that wall. Down this way. Again, this path is really where I want to draw your attention to, so we'll keep painting over there. Okay, and you'll notice I'm not being meticulous at all in trying to keep my brush in the lines. And so if we were to intensify this at all, we really do start to see some of those lines become apparent, and I might want it to be a little bit brighter. But here's where this masking idea comes in. I don't even want to call it a trick. It's really very, very simple, but it's a different way of thinking, okay? Because I know a lot of people are thinking of using a small brush or the magic brush inside of ON1 or doing something to get really meticulous with your masking. And what I would say is switch your mode to paint out. And by the way, if you're in paint in, you can just hold down your option or your alt key and that'll put you into paint out. And then when you let it go, it's back in paint in. But I'm actually just going to switch it to paint out here. Put your brush into paint out mode, hit the right bracket key, make the brush bigger, all right? Make sure you're at a 100% feather on both sides of this. When we were painting, we want it to be, also when we're erasing. Make sure you're at a 100% feather and bring that opacity down a little bit more, about 10 or 15% more. And then what you're gonna do is use the edge of the brush. If you were to think of this brush, the center is the strongest part because we have a feather of 100%. So if you were to use this brush, the center is the strong part, the edges are the weak part of the brush. And so what I'll do is I'll start to brush outside of my intended area and let those edges chip away at what I've painted on and make this more realistic in nature. So let me undo that. And what I'm going to do is let's help visualize this as well. I'm going to click on the mask. We've got a couple of options. You could go over here and you can click on view. You can actually view the mask that way. I'll click on view again to turn it off. You could always go up here under mask and change view mode and just change it to red overlay. And then come up here and do show mask. There we go. So now we see a red overlay of what we've been working with. But what I would do is start to paint, and the red is where we're hiding this appearance from. But I would start to paint, maybe even at a little bit of a lower opacity, really, really fade this in. Again, honestly, I don't think we need to see the mask. I did it as a demonstration. It becomes obtrusive to me. But what I'm doing is I'm letting the edge of the brush do the work for me, all right? And in a way, it's more realistic light because light would not be perfect. Light would not perfectly go along this path and stop at the crack or the place where the vertical part of the path. It would not perfectly stop anywhere along here. So we're actually creating, I think, more realistic way of dodging and burning and lighting this, right? Again, I would do the same thing. Let that eat away at the edges. So what we are painting just looks a little bit more natural, okay? And it just gives a more natural effect. You're never going to use the center of the brush because that's the strongest part of the brush. I'd never want to paint there, right? I'm just going to let it eat away at the edges and let that feathered edge do the work for me. And it really creates a very natural way of brushing onto your photos. So let's go jump into a different example here. Again, another one where I think a lot of people might go and think we have to very meticulously mask this. So let's zoom in a little bit there. Switch over to my local corrections. And I'm not saying it would be bad to do it this way. We could go ahead and turn on our perfect brush. I'm going to bring that opacity up to 100 here. We could go turn on our perfect brush and we could go through here and we could paint, probably increase that. And of course, I'm in paint out mode. If things ever don't work for you, look at what I just did. I left myself in paint out mode with the brush. I really want to paint in. So we'll go over here and we can turn on our perfect brush and, it gets a little splotchy. So you do have to be careful with that sometimes. So I don't even know that I'd want to go that direction. I'm not getting a very good result from it. So rather than do that, let's turn perfect brush off and let's very purposefully overpaint this, right? I'm just going to paint the living daylights out of it and brush on the whole thing and then brush inside. Okay. And again, we can go and we can show mask and we can make sure we didn't miss any spots, which I don't think we did. So that's looking good. It's a good keyboard shortcut to remember as well, if you don't want to have to keep coming up here and clicking on that. So now obviously we have some problems. So again, we switch this over to paint out. And I would do this in phases. The first phase I would do is keep the brush at 100%, because if we don't get rid of this glow, it's going to look funky. We can't use an opacity because it'll fade it, and we don't want there to be a glow. So I would keep the brush at 100% and then just work your way around your subject and just eat away. Let that feathered brush, you'll notice I'm never letting the center of the brush go inside. I'm using my left and right bracket keys to change the size of it. But it doesn't look good if you go along the edge too much with it, because then it starts to become a very clear, bright, and dark nature to it. Okay, so hold on a second. Hold on. All right. I think I undid too many times. Let's see here. Yeah, I did. Let's do this again. But again, we'll make it super simple. There we go. Brushing, brushing, brushing. You get the idea. And done. Okay. So same thing we did before. Switch it to paint out mode. Again, just let the edges of your brush eat away. And to me, this is a very, very much more realistic way of making your subject brighter, but without necessarily drawing a hard outline around it. It would never have a hard line. That's why people have so many problems sometimes with halos and things around the edges of their photos, because you're doing a major adjustment like we just did here, right? We're doing a major adjustment by brightening something, but then there's a very dark outline. And so halos are almost unavoidable in so many circumstances. So I would go around and I'd paint like that. And if you look at the before and after, if I turn the adjustment off and then on, you can see we are indeed brightening our subject. I might even boost those shadows a bit here as well. All right. And then if you went away or you hid too much of it, switch your brush back to paint in mode. Now you can be a little bit more meticulous. Now you can be a little bit more careful about changing the size of your brush to go in and paint in some of those missing areas that we might have hidden. Okay. Not saying it's the only way to go in here and mask. The one thing that I have learned when it comes to the masking world and any program that we're talking about is get yourself away from absolutes. There are no absolutes. My whole, when I try to teach masking to people, I'm trying to give you a number of different alternatives. because not one is going to work for every situation. So you put all these little things into your little repertoire of tricks, into your little bag of tricks, and you call upon them. As one doesn't work, you start to have all these ideas of some other ones that do work. And in fact, this one, I think this is something when I'm doing any brushing and I need to mask some areas away and it doesn't have to be a perfect edge, this is the one that I call upon the most.